LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 11th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 14 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use and political analysis show for a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. Sorry, Sandy also just showed up as the live studio audience. Maybe I'll get a shot of Sandy for you later, but I'll start off with political comedy from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, a couple clips from his monologue last Friday. I won't go into the whole apology for saying the N-word thing. I may talk about that at the end a little bit, but that would be the subject for another video, because the subject of tonight's video, or of tonight's live stream, back live streaming, no CBS copyright takedown, so I am live streaming with a live streaming audience as well as my live studio audience of Sandy, who's lying down right now to my left. I will be covering Trump versus Comey. Who is the one who was lying? There was the big blockbuster testimony from James Comey this last week, and he basically accused the President of the United States, Donald Trump, of lying on some key issues, like whether Trump asked him to pledge loyalty or whether Trump hoped he would find his way towards letting go of the Michael Flynn investigation. Those are two big topics of contention between Donald Trump and James Comey. That's why this is Trump versus Comey, who is lying. They can't both be telling the truth, I don't think, although up in the corner here you can click on the little eye and answer the poll as to, is it Donald Trump who's lying, James Comey who's lying, or neither, both, some combination thereof. But I want to start off, like I said, with political comedy. Bill Maher made fun both of James Comey's testimony and what it means about Donald Trump, as well as the Republican reaction to James Comey's testimony. And I'm going to start off with a clip from the beginning of his monologue. This is from last Friday night, Bill Maher making fun of the implications of James Comey's testimony on Thursday, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
America is a funny place. It all comes down to who you believe. A pathological liar who has been known to interrupt himself mid-lie to tell another lie. That's true. Or the patriotic Boy Scout who took meticulous notes. Every meeting he took notes right after. Trump needs more meetings where people take notes. They're called psychiatrists. But listen to this. Comey was contacted, he said, 9 times. 9 times. He's only been in office like 100 days. By Trump. Many of those times, Trump asked everyone else to leave the room. To the point where Comey had to tell other people, don't leave me don't leave me alone with him. To which every Trump beauty pageant contestant said, welcome to our world. But here's the part I love of Comey's testimony. He says, Trump said to him, I have been very loyal to you, very loyal. We had that thing. Why does everything Trump say sounds like a wiretap of the Gambinos? We had that thing in the clam bar, you know, the piano wire, that thing we did. Trump probably has a mob name for Comey, Jimmy Too Tall. Remember when he had him come over to him at the... Jimmy Too Tall, come here, you're a made man now. Someday I may need a favor, and that day may never come. Take the gun, leave the cannoli. You know it?
Well, my one criticism at the end, he got it backwards there. It's leave the gun, take the cannoli. If you watch The Godfather, you know it's leave the gun, take the cannoli, not take the gun, leave the cannoli, because as long as you don't have your fingerprints on the gun, then when you leave the gun with the murder victim, then there's no way to connect you with the gun. Your only real jeopardy, and this is criminal defense lawyer talking here, is if you have the gun with you and then the gun is matched to the murder, then you're in trouble. But if you leave the gun with the body and there's no way to connect you to the gun, that's one less liability to worry about. That's why it's leave the gun, take the cannoli. But I thought those were generally good jokes, making fun of Donald Trump's. This is actually kind of what Chris Christie, his defense of Donald Trump was. It's just New York talk. It's kind of like locker room talk. He's just talking, like the New York real estate business people talk, which is apparently obstruction of justice, as I will talk about a little bit later in the program. But I want to get to the second excerpt from Bill Maher's monologue before I get to the real news clips. This is Bill Maher making fun of the Republican reaction to Donald Trump, or to James Comey's testimony about Donald Trump's 9 meetings with him, and basically trying to say that, he's new to the presidency. He's never been in politics. Well, that's one of a couple different ridiculous justifications Speaker of the House Paul Ryan came up with that Bill Maher made fun of in his monologue, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together here.
Ryan's excuse. Paul Ryan said yesterday, if Comey came out with the same testimony about a Democratic president, we wouldn't be going for impeachment. Oh, for fuck's sake. If this was Hillary with the same shit going on, they would have yanked her out of office so fast, the only thing that would be left would be a smoldering pantsuit. And then he said, Trump didn't mean to obstruct justice. He's just new at this. Yeah, right. Until now, he's been lying in the private sector. He's just new. In what other profession can you get away with this? Bear with me. I'm not a dentist. I work at a shoe store. It's not just him. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. The main Republican talking point is essentially Trump is too stupid to be guilty of anything. But if that's the case, isn't he too stupid to be president? All right, we got a great...
I closed a window there by mistake. I'm sorry about that. Did I mess up the whole stream? Hopefully not. But I really liked those jokes from Bill Maher. I thought that he actually in some ways did a better job of ridiculing the Republicans. And you'll see later that I'm going to show some other Republicans try to justify what Donald Trump did as not obstruction of justice, and I will criticize that for you. I think that is everything. There's no problem here. That's weird. I closed the window I used to stream and by mistake, and I guess it kept streaming. So that's good news for you and me. That's why it kind of messed up there at the end. Sorry about that. But now I'm going to start showing you the actual news clips. What I want to do is, this is the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, except no NBC this week because Meet the Press took the week off because of the French Open tennis. So I have 4 of the big 5 corporate news outlets that I'm going to show you. And by the way, I have the clip list down in the video description if you want to check that out and follow along with the 14 clips I'm showing. I forgot to mention that at the beginning of the show. But what I want to do is compare the way that this issue, the Comey testimony versus Trump, was framed in the 4 networks that did have Sunday morning news analysis shows this morning. Basically, 3 of them framed it the way that I framed it in my title, Trump versus Comey. One of them has to be lying. It's a credibility contest because basically you can't really have both their versions of the truth be true because there are some definite conflicts on issues, like I said, of whether Trump asked Comey to drop the Flynn investigation and whether Trump asked Comey to give him a pledge of loyalty. Donald Trump specifically denied that, and you'll see both those issues in all but one. Can you guess which one of the networks did not show those two issues? Fox News, of course. That's the fourth one I'll show, but I'm going to start off with the summary from CNN's State of the Union. Brianna Keilar was guest hosting for Jake Tapper on State of the Union, but she still said the State of the Union, it's pointing fingers, which is, it's either Trump or Comey, and I think there's a fairly good summary just in about a minute and 20 seconds from CNN State of the Union this morning, right here.
Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is pointing fingers. President Trump is in a war of words with fired FBI Director James Comey, who accused the president of asking him to back off the Flynn investigation earlier this year. Trump came out swinging with a strong denial of the account.
He did say under oath that you told him to let the Flynn, you said you hoped the Flynn investigation he could let go.
I didn't say that.
So he lied about that.
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, I will tell you, I didn't say that.
And did he ask you to pledge his
And there'd be
loyalty?
nothing wrong if I did say it, according to everybody that I've read today, but I did not say that.
Comey's testimony also put the spotlight on Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who recused himself from the Russia investigation but recommended Comey's firing. Sessions announced yesterday that he plans to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Tuesday, saying in a statement, in light of reports regarding Mr. Comey's recent testimony before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, it is important that I have an opportunity to address these matters in the appropriate forum. The Senate Intelligence Committee is the most appropriate forum for such matters, as it has been conducting an investigation and has access to relevant classified information. And I'm joined now by a leading Democrat.
So CNN there with Brianna Keilar, I think they showed the basic conflicts between Trump and Comey, and they also pointed out this Jeff Sessions issue, which I think is something we're going to see come up, as I'll show from clips later in the program. Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States, is scheduled to testify to the House Intelligence Committee on Tuesday, and it looks like it may be public. That's what they're calling for, and then he may go to the House Judiciary Committee. Did I say House? It's actually the Senate Intelligence Committee, and then the Senate Judiciary Committee. Dianne Feinstein, I'll show you in one of the clips near the end of the show, is actually calling for him to testify to the Senate Judiciary Committee, because of all the staff members there who are lawyers and know more about obstruction of justice, not just about Russian interference in our elections. That's the new issue is obstruction of justice. Russian interference was pretty much shown by all our intelligence agencies, if you believe all our intelligence agencies. But like I said, that was the CNN report, and it included the Jeff Sessions angle, because one of the explosive issues that was kind of hinted at in James Comey's testimony on Thursday was that Attorney General Jeff Sessions may have had some sort of contact with the Russians that he hasn't disclosed, and needed to recuse himself from the Russia investigation even like a week before he actually did, based on this third meeting at the Mayflower Hotel in April 2016 that he hasn't disclosed. But that didn't come up in either the ABC or the CBS report. They didn't bring up the whole Jeff Sessions angle, but I think at least they brought up the James Comey versus Donald Trump angle, and one of them has to be lying, unlike what Fox News did that I'll show at the end. But here's the ABC report. Basically the same length, same facts, leaving out Jeff Sessions over here.
It was big and the hearing delivered. It was a blockbuster, reaching 89 million on Facebook, 19 million more on TV. What they saw, like so much in this young Trump presidency, something that's never happened before. An FBI director fired by the president under oath, accusing the White House of lying and strongly suggesting that the president himself committed an impeachable offense. Comey also confirmed that he told the president 3 times that Trump was not personally being investigated for colluding with Russia. Trump took that as vindication in an early Friday morning tweet. But in the Rose Garden that afternoon, the president dismissed Comey's damning claims, saying he never directed Comey to drop the Michael Flynn investigation and never asked for a pledge of loyalty.
I hardly know the man. I'm not going to say, I want you to pledge allegiance. Who would do that? Who would ask a man to pledge allegiance under oath? I mean, think of it. I hardly know the man. It doesn't make sense. No, I didn't say that, and I didn't say the other.
So if Robert Mueller wanted to speak with you about that,
I would be glad
willing
to tell him exactly what I just told you, Jim.
Two very different men, two very different stories. Who is telling the truth? Whether the president committed a crime, now something, as Comey said, for Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller to sort out. And our first guest is a former...
I'll have a couple clips of Preet Bharara a little later, and I thought he was a really good guest. But at the end of that clip, did it seem like President Donald Trump called Jonathan Karl Jim? I think he might have called him Jim. Is that like another symptom of his deteriorating mental condition? That's what Nancy Pelosi was talking about this last week. But one thing I liked about that ABC analysis is that they said that James Comey in his testimony strongly hinted that Donald Trump had committed an impeachable offense. And I think that was sort of the subtext that you really have. I watched the James Comey testimony a couple times, and it seems like, you know, one of his best friends, Robert Mueller, who was the FBI director before him, is now the special counsel, and he wrote all these memos sort of documenting this ongoing pattern of obstruction of justice from President Donald Trump, and he wrapped it up and he handed it over to one of his best friends. This is Comey handed over to Robert Mueller, the special counsel, and it seems like there's going to be an ongoing investigation, and that's going to be the direction of the investigation if you read the subtext of James Comey's testimony. Now, I start off a little bit skeptical of James Comey's testimony, honestly, because I started off my legal career between my second and third year of law school, and then through my entire third, which is the last year of law school, I was a law clerk at the Federal Public Defender's Office. And, you know, the Federal Public Defender represents people accused of crimes in the federal system, and so the cops in that system, in many cases, are the FBI. So when I look at James Comey testifying as the former director of the FBI, I see a cop testifying, and as a former criminal defense attorney, of course, I'm skeptical of cops. They come across as very honest and very... they come across as credible because they're professional witnesses, and James Comey is obviously a professional witness. So I have to tell you, I start off from that place of skepticism, but in a swearing contest between James Comey and Donald Trump, even someone who starts off from a skeptical place on FBI testimony has to give James Comey the win on that, I think, as I will discuss. But like I said, I want to show one more, or actually two more news summaries of the Trump versus Comey credibility contest. That's also the way Face the Nation, CBS's Face the Nation, framed it that way. They didn't have the Jeff Sessions thing. They didn't have the subtext of impeachable offenses that ABC pointed out that I thought was good in that last clip. So of the three non-Fox News networks that did a summary, I thought the Face the Nation one was probably the worst of the three, as I will discuss with you. And it's about the same length, a minute and 12 seconds. I'll discuss it with you after we watch it together here.
This week it came down to credibility, with two very powerful men accusing each other of lying.
I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting.
And some of the things that he said just weren't true.
During Thursday's blockbuster congressional hearing, the former FBI director testified under oath that the president told him he hoped he could drop the investigation into his former national security advisor, General Michael Flynn, and asked him to pledge his loyalty. The next day, in a Rose Garden press conference, President Trump hit back.
I didn't say that.
So he lied about that.
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, I will tell you, I didn't say that.
The president said he would be willing to repeat those statements under oath in front of the special counsel, and once again raised the prospect of audio recordings of his conversations with Comey.
Do tapes exist of your conversations with him?
Well, I'll tell you about that maybe sometime in the very near future.
It was the latest round of peekaboo about the tapes, which the president first tweeted about on May 12th. It was that tweet, Comey told Congress, that prompted him to leak his written memos of his meetings with the president to the press. And we start with our...
So, like I said, I thought that was the weakest summary of the three non-Fox News networks that had news analysis programs this Sunday morning. But I did like the way at the end there they had that little summary of how it was Donald Trump's tweet about the possibility of tapes that may be his downfall, because that's why James Comey leaked these memos through his friend at Columbia Law School to New York Times, sorry. So to the New York Times, and that made Trump point him out as a leaker. But of course, the fact that James Comey leaked is one of the main talking points of the Republicans, and of course, one of the few facts that came out in the Fox News summary framing the issues at the beginning of Fox News Sunday this morning, even though Chris Wallace is supposedly a straight news anchor on Fox News Sunday. But the supposedly straight news anchor Chris Wallace started off saying how Trump claimed victory, but admitted that the issue wasn't over because he also promised to testify, said 100% he would testify. And then you'll see that leads into questioning of the new chair of the Republican Party now that Reince Priebus is chief of staff. This is the niece of Mitt Romney. Her name is Ronna McDaniel, and she was on a couple different shows. And you'll see Chris Wallace does his intro that really frames the issues in favor of Donald Trump, and then asks a question about leaks, not about obstruction of justice or any of the major issues facing Donald Trump in the face of James Comey's testimony. Obviously, the Fox News framing is very different from the last three framings from the other three networks that I showed you, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip over here.
President Trump is claiming victory after former FBI Director James Comey's testimony this week, saying there's no evidence of collusion with the Russians or obstruction of justice. But the president recognizes the investigation isn't over, saying he would 100% testify under oath before the special counsel. Where do the investigations and the Trump agenda go from here? Joining me now, the chair of the Republican Party, Ronna McDaniel. Ms. McDaniel, the president has been tweeting today, and I want to put up one of those tweets. Here it is. I believe the James Comey leaks will be far more prevalent than anyone ever thought possible. Totally illegal, very cowardly. What do you think, the fact that Comey admits that he leaked at least one memo to the press? What do you think that indicates about the former FBI director?
I think it shows how questionable his character is, that he would take conversations that he had with the President of the United States, which should be protected under executive privilege, and then he gave them to a friend to leak to the New York Times. I think it proves that the president made the right choice in firing Director Comey, and it brings into great question some of the decision-making he made as FBI director and since.
Now, the president on Friday after Comey's...
So that's Ronna McDaniel, the new chair of the Republican National Committee, giving some of the spin that you'll hear from several Republicans that I'm going to show before I get to the Democrats. And you saw, obviously, in the introduction there from Chris Wallace of Fox News Sunday that Fox News is living in some alternate reality. Assuming that you believe that the other networks have, that's more real than the Fox News reality. That's obviously based on my history on YouTube and my huge number of Fox News bias videos. I believe that the other mainstream media networks do a better job of reflecting reality. Not a perfect job, but a better job than Fox News ever does. And even that includes Fox News Sunday, the supposedly straight news program. But I do have to show at least I showed the whole framing from Fox News Sunday, but Chris Wallace did do a follow-up question to Ronna McDaniel about how can Donald Trump claim to be vindicated when there are some conflicts between what Donald Trump claims and what James Comey claims. So it's not like Chris Wallace didn't ever bring that up, but he didn't really confront Ronna McDaniel on her answer to his question. There was no good follow-up, and I will discuss that with you after we watch that second Fox News Sunday clip from this morning over here.
On Friday, after Comey's testimony, he said that he viewed that testimony as, quote, total vindication. But in his testimony, Mr. Comey said that the president, he repeatedly said that he lies. He said the president in a private dinner sought a pledge of loyalty, that in an Oval Office meeting, he basically asked Comey to let the Flynn investigation go. Total vindication?
Listen, Chris, we have to keep in mind that this is one person's record of what happened. The only two people who know what happened in those meetings are the president and James Comey. So James Comey put forward his memos, his recollection, but that's his version of events. The things that James Comey said with regard to the president, that he's not under investigation, he's never been under investigation, that there's been no obstruction, that there's been no effort to impede the investigation. Those are things we've heard across from many witnesses and many other individuals. So that corroborated exactly what the president's been saying all along. But I take James Comey's testimony as just his version of events, and it's important that we look at it that way.
You created an opposition team, an operation.
And you can hear the beginning of the follow-up question there from Chris Wallace that he never really confronted her on that whole thing, and the whole idea of executive privilege, that, you know, that's a ridiculous, but the idea that it's one person's interpretation of what happened, and that, you know, there are certain things that James Comey said that were corroborated and other things that aren't corroborated, and the exculpatory things, the things that exonerate Donald Trump, are corroborated. That, I mean, I don't think that actually fits the facts, but I would at least give her the benefit of my experience as a criminal defense attorney, that two people can witness the same event or have a conversation and come away with two very different memories of what happened, even though they're both eyewitnesses. And it's not necessarily true that one of them is lying. I was reading the live comments along the way. I saw a comment from L. Middleman. I don't know if you can see this. Let me. It says, like, as a lawyer, you understand that people can take away very different interpretations of a conversation. And that's true. Two different eyewitnesses can remember two different things. Memory's faulty. People's brains fill in the gaps, but you have to remember that James Comey in this situation, right afterwards, he took almost live contemporaneous notes. He, like, his immediate memory memorialized, and I mean, that's kind of the most reliable type of witness testimony. That's why police officers take immediate notes, and why they are professional witnesses, as I was talking about earlier. Those were the two Fox News clips, and that was the first Republican response to the James Comey testimony. The next clip I want to show is this is another Republican trying to defend Donald Trump. This is one of our favorites, if you are a fan of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, Senator Lindsey Graham, doing his best to defend Donald Trump after the testimony of James Comey. This is from CBS's Face the Nation. This is John Dickerson asking pretty much the same question as Chris Wallace asked Ronna McDaniel. How can Trump claim to be vindicated when there are these conflicts between Comey's testimony and what Trump said in the news conference? And he basically comes up with all of the talking points that Republicans are using, pretty much as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
He thought it was vindicated.
Well, I think it was true that he's not under investigation for colluding with the Russians, and I don't think what was said amounts to obstruction of justice. Now, what the president did was inappropriate, but here's what's so frustrating for Republicans like me. You may be the first president in history to go down because you can't stop inappropriately talking about an investigation that, if you just were quiet, would clear you. It's frustrating for me to want to help a man who I think will do big things no other Republican would do, like immigration. Believe it or not, I think Donald Trump may deliver us from a broken immigration system. This is not helping. This should be in the Judiciary Committee. I heard Dianne Feinstein on the show earlier today. You had Comey suggest that the current U.S. Attorney General and the former Attorney General were playing politics with the investigation, Lynch and Sessions. That needs to be in our committee. Let me tell you this to the American people. If the Attorney General's office has become a political office, that's bad for us all. So I want to get to the bottom of that, and it should be in judiciary.
What do you want to know from Attorney General Sessions?
I want to know, is it true what Comey said? Did you create an atmosphere there that people believed that you could not fairly render judgment on the president's interactions with Comey? I want to hear from Loretta Lynch. Did you say, please call it a matter, not an investigation? And I want Comey to come to our committee because I know on 2 separate occasions he has told members of the House and the Senate that the main reason he jumped into the election last year and took over the job of the Attorney General is because he believed there were emails between the Democratic National Committee and the Department of Justice that compromised the Department of Justice, and he thought the Russians were going to release these emails. That's why he jumped in and took over Loretta Lynch's job. I want to know, is that true?
Well, now, that email, there's been some reporting that that was a fake email or doctored or
When
something.
he told the House and Senate as late as early as a month ago, he never mentioned it was fake. I don't know if it's fake or not, but the FBI called me about this, John, and said that they wanted to brief me because I've got some of this wrong. I saw the Washington Post story. I doubt if it's fake. Maybe it is, but I don't want to be briefed by myself. I want Democrats and Republicans on the judiciary to be briefed together. Our committee has been together, and we're going to stay together.
So, since we'll stay in the...
Now, if you're wondering what Lindsey Graham was talking about there at the end, that's something you saw him like bring up unprompted on a previous Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, where over and over again he kept bringing up this idea that James Comey intervened in the Hillary Clinton investigation because of fake misinformation that came from the Russians intercepted. It was like intercepted misinformation conversations where the Russians were claiming they had emails showing collusion between Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General at that time, and the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. And that turned out to be, there were no such emails. And that's what Lindsey Graham wants James Comey to answer. And James Comey basically he sort of alluded to that in his testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday, but he said basically that the story was very, very wrong, but he couldn't answer how it was wrong in open session. He had to do it in closed session, and it sounds like the FBI was also trying to set Lindsey Graham straight, but he wouldn't have it. He didn't want the FBI to brief him. He wanted public testimony as to what is up with that whole story. So at least I have to give Lindsey Graham credit for trying to let us know what, was James Comey misled by Russian misinformation to intervene in the campaign to take over for Loretta Lynch and, say all those negative things about Hillary Clinton that may have thrown the election to Donald Trump. At least Hillary Clinton believes that James Comey threw the election to Donald Trump. You can let me know what you think about that and what's behind all that. It's kind of a mystery. Maybe that will eventually come out. It's one of many things that may eventually come out. There are many shoes left to drop, I guess. Many shoes left to drop from this centipede, as John McCain likes to say, although there are no John McCain clips tonight. But the next clip I want to show is another Republican trying to say that nothing James Comey said really means obstruction of justice. And I think that is, it might be obstruction of justice, it might not, but it's certainly a strong argument for obstruction of justice, which this is the Republican senator from Utah, Mike Lee, trying to claim that that's not true, and not doing it very convincingly, I don't think, over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to George Stephanopoulos, and I will discuss why I think he is not making a good argument after we watch that clip together here.
Stories emerging from the hearings. You've had the story of President Trump saying he never asked for that Pledge of Loyalty, saying he never asked James Comey to let the Flynn investigation go. You have a very different story from James Comey. During the campaign, you were very critical of candidate Trump for suggesting that the father of your friend, Senator Ted Cruz, was somehow involved in the assassination of JFK. You said he did that without a scintilla of evidence. Senator Cruz himself called Donald Trump a pathological liar. So if it's the word of James Comey versus the word of Donald Trump, who gets the benefit of the doubt?
Look, in this circumstance, if he's got evidence of collusion, bring it forward. If he's got evidence of corruption, of obstruction, bring it forward. I have yet to see anything, even a scintilla. And so it's time to wrap this up and it's time to move on. I don't see any evidence of anything happening here, and as a result, I think it's time to move forward.
You're saying that even if what James Comey is saying is true, you don't see the evidence?
Yeah, I don't see that amounts to obstruction. I don't see any evidence of intent to obstruct. I don't see any indication that there was even the potential for corruption here or for obstruction of justice.
Oh, sorry for freezing up there. I was trying to take a picture of Sandy to show you a little bit later for the Sandy fans out there. But that's the last Republican trying to do the I see no evil here, which is, I think, pretty ridiculous. And especially the idea that there's not even a scintilla of evidence of Donald Trump obstructing justice. I mean, there's not a slam dunk case, but there's certainly evidence based on what James Comey said. You know, there may be some other side. I don't want to just take the cop's version as the absolute truth, but since his opposing witness here is the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who does not have a very good track record for veracity. I mean, I have to say that I have to start with the assumption that there is some veracity in what James Comey is saying, and I'm going to show now, having shown all those Republicans unsuccessfully, from my point of view, trying to defend Donald Trump, I want to show a few Democrats explaining what the problems are and also what Democrats want to question witnesses about. But the first two clips are actually from Preet Bharara, who was the U.S. attorney in New York who had jurisdiction over Trump Tower and many Trump businesses. Donald Trump initially, after he was elected, before he became president, said that he was going to keep Preet Bharara on as U.S. attorney. And apparently he had a couple phone conversations with him while he was still president-elect. And then one after, he tried to have another conversation with him after he became president, after the inauguration. That's all about what happened in those phone conversations is the second clip I want to show you. But the first clip I want to show you is Preet Bharara talking to George Stephanopoulos on This Week with George Stephanopoulos about why the idea that Trump, this is the idea that Bill Maher made fun of at the beginning of the program, that, Trump is too stupid, too naive, doesn't know the ways of Washington, like Paul Ryan said that, he doesn't know it's improper for the president to talk to the director of the FBI about an ongoing investigation of the Trump campaign. It's kind of ridiculous. And Preet Bharara brings out one of the main reasons that it is completely ridiculous based on what Trump said during his own presidential campaign, as I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together here.
Whether or not Donald Trump knew what he was doing. And I saw, I think, over the weekend that Paul Ryan, who's, I think, in line to be president of the United States, he's in the succession line, has been trying to excuse this behavior. Again, putting aside whether it's obstruction or impeachable. That the President of the United States is new to this, and he's new to protocols, makes very, very little sense when the President became the President in part by campaigning at rally after rally after rally that I saw and Americans saw on the issue of whether or not it was appropriate for the former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, to have a meeting on the tarmac with Bill Clinton. So he very well knew what the optics of that were and what the protocols were. And even though there's no evidence and no one has come forward to say anything untoward was discussed on that airplane at the tarmac when an ongoing investigation was underway with respect to Hillary Clinton, he nevertheless said, this is a reason why you should vote for me and not for that person. And for people to turn around and say, now that there is evidence that the President of the United States himself had a private conversation after kicking other high officials out of the room and told his FBI director confidentially to do something about a case that's pending I think that's a big deal, and it can't be excused as simply being a novice or new.
The president's defenders, like Alan Dershowitz, say there's no grounds for obstruction. You've talked about that. And he, in fact, says that the presidents have the constitutional right to fire FBI directors and investigations as much as they want. One of the president's attorneys, Jay Sekulow, is coming up next. He says there's no no basis for obstruction. You're a former prosecutor. Is there evidence there to begin a case for obstruction?
I think there's absolutely evidence to begin a case. I think it's very important for all sorts of armchair speculators in the law to be clear that no one knows right now whether there is a provable case of obstruction. It's also true, I think, based on what I see as a third party and out of government, that there's no basis to say there's no obstruction. And this point on whether or not the president has legal authority to fire or to direct an investigation, I don't really get it. It's a little silly to me. The fact that you have authority to remove someone from office doesn't automatically immunize that act from criminal responsibility. And I'll give you an example of something from a different context. If it were to be true, and this is all made up for the sake of argument, if it were to be true that Michael Flynn offered $1 million to Donald Trump and said, I'm going to give you this $1 million, and I'm giving it to you because I want you to fire Jim Comey. And then Donald Trump fired Jim Comey, which everyone agrees he has the absolute authorization and authority to do. That would be an open and shut federal criminal case. It's a quid pro quo, and he could be charged if he were not the president of the United States. So this argument that you keep hearing on the TV shows that the mere fact that the president can fire an official at will doesn't solve the problem.
In the end, though, as a prosecutor...
And I think, of course, Preet Bharara has more experience in federal criminal law than I do. You know, I was a public defender for a few years and a law clerk at the Federal Public Defender's Office, so I have a little experience in federal criminal law and some experience in criminal law, but Preet Bharara, as a U.S. attorney, knows what he's talking about when it comes to obstruction of justice. And, of course, he's not saying that Donald Trump is guilty of obstruction of justice, but there's definitely something there. I was reading the live comments along the way. I tried to make this bigger, but I think I may have cut off some of the end of the comment. This is from one of my live viewers, NO8549, saying, it's too early to say if it's obstruction of justice, but it looks bad, and I definitely agree with that. It's, like I said earlier in the program, I think that James Comey wrote a bunch of memos and wrapped them up in a bow and gave them to one of his best friends, Robert Mueller, that argue for a charge of obstruction of justice. But it's really going to be, you know, I think the weight of the legal opinion from the scholars are that, and certainly within the Justice Department especially, the weight of the legal opinion is that the President of the United States cannot be criminally prosecuted while he's president. So the only real remedy for the president committing obstruction of justice is impeachment by the House and removal by 2/3 of the Senate, which you saw Mike Lee there, and Lindsey Graham, those are two Republican members of the Senate, and they didn't sound like they were ready to remove the president. They didn't even sound like they were ready to accuse him of a crime, which it takes a majority of the House of Representatives to impeach the president, which means accusing him of obstruction of justice or abuse of power or whatever the impeachable crimes might be. And I think there are some good arguments for impeachable crimes, but I don't think you're going to get impeachment until the Democrats take over the House in 2018. If that's a possibility, could happen. It depends on different facts that come out. But I want to move on to the next Preet Bharara clip that I promised you. This is some corroborating evidence for James Comey. This is Preet Bharara talking about the 3 phone conversations, or actually 2 phone conversations and 1 phone call he refused to return from Donald Trump. That this is his experience that he called sort of like when he listened to the James Comey testimony, it was like deja vu for him, as he explained to George Stephanopoulos over in this clip.
Encounters with President-elect Trump before you were fired by President Trump back in March. Starting at during the transition, he invited you to Trump Tower, asked you to stay on as U.S. Attorney?
He did.
And then he followed that up with 2 phone calls as President-elect?
He did.
What happened in those phone calls?
So they're very unusual phone calls, and it's sort of, when I've been reading the stories about how the president has been contacting Jim Comey over time, it felt a little bit like deja vu. I'm not the FBI director, but I was, the chief federal law enforcement officer in Manhattan with jurisdiction over a lot of things, including, business interests and other things in New York. The number of times that President Obama called me in 7.5 years was 0. The number of times I would have been expected to be called by the President of the United States would be 0, because there has to be some kind of arm's length relationship given the jurisdiction that various people have.
So what did he say?
So he called me in December, ostensibly just to shoot the breeze and ask me how I was doing and wanted to make sure I was okay. It was similar to what Jim Comey testified to with respect to a call he got when he was getting on the helicopter. I didn't say anything at the time to him. It was a little bit uncomfortable, but he was not the president. He was only the president-elect. He called me again 2 days before the inauguration, again, seemingly to check in and shoot the breeze. And then he called me a third time after he became president, and I refused to return the call.
That you didn't take because he was president. But on those other phone calls, James Comey talked about the president trying to develop what he called a patronage relationship. Is that what you think was happening with you?
So that's not the word I used. I was in discussions with my own folks, and in reporting the phone call to the chief of staff, to the attorney general, I said it appeared to be that he was trying to cultivate some kind of relationship. And it may be hard for viewers of yours to understand if you're a layperson and not in the Justice Department. What's wrong with that? The CEO of a company wants to call, a field manager somewhere in the country because he thinks he's an up-and-comer. What's wrong with that? The problem is the Justice Department is different. And for the same reasons that Donald Trump emphasized how it looked when there was that tarmac incident and you had a private conversation between someone who had an interest in an investigation and the person who was responsible for, advancing or ending that investigation, it's a very weird and peculiar thing for a one-on-one conversation without the Attorney General, without warning, between the President and me or any United States attorney who has been asked to investigate various things and is in a position, hypothetically, to investigate business interests and associates
Trump
of the President.
based in New York.
Hypothetically, there is the authority to investigate all sorts of interests relating to a president, which is why there are strict guidelines in place about what can or cannot be talked about. Now, I'm not saying that he was going to ask me about a case, although there is some evidence in the record now that after a period of time, given the Jim Comey testimony, there's some evidence that Donald Trump didn't think anything of asking a high-level law enforcement official to take a particular action that he wanted for himself on a criminal case.
And then when he was actually president, you refused to take the call, and I guess the next day you're fired?
So the call came in, I got a message, we deliberated over it, thought it was inappropriate to return the call, and 22 hours later I was asked to resign, along with 45 other people.
And some Democrats, notably Elizabeth Warren, connecting that to the fact that you did have jurisdiction over Trump Tower. Do you think there's any connection?
I'm not drawing the connection. I've lived long enough to know that anything is possible, and we're seeing a lot of things going on now with respect to accusations that Jim Comey made under oath in a congressional hearing. So I don't know. To this day, I have no idea why I was fired. It doesn't bother me. I'm living a good life and very happily. But I have no idea.
Preet Bharara, thanks for coming in today.
So what do you think? Is Preet Bharara going to run for some political office? Is he a Democrat running for office? Or is he corroborating evidence for James Comey's testimony about how Donald Trump tried to cultivate him in terms of, having a personal patronage, loyalty relationship, or whatever you want to call it, or I don't know, maybe you think that Preet Bharara is just a partisan and he's just like James Comey, they're both bitter over being fired by Donald Trump. I don't know. That's not the way it strikes me, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I thought it was interesting to hear both that sort of corroborating evidence from Preet Bharara and also his argument that Donald Trump knows about undue influence because of what he said during the campaign about the meeting between Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton on the tarmac in that airport. So those were both worthwhile, newsworthy clips I thought to show you, and I have just 3 more clips before I end the broadcast tonight. The first first 2 are both my California Senator Dianne Feinstein, and I've been pretty critical of her over, pretty much all of these broadcasts whenever she comes on. I think she's too conservative to be a Democrat a lot of the time, especially when it comes to things like surveillance and criminal justice. But in this case, she seems to be playing the role of the elder statesman and is taking some, because she's the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, which will actually be responsible for any kind of finding of impeachable offenses and also any finding of oversight findings for the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. I think she actually makes some good points both about the question of obstruction of justice and why this investigation is better in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate rather than the Intelligence Committee. And she does have a little bit of a turf war because she's a member of the Intelligence Committee, but she's the ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, so she gets more of a spotlight if it's in the Judiciary Committee. So keep that in mind when you watch this first answer from her talking to Brianna Keilar on CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
In that letter to Senator Grassley, who is the top Republican on the Judiciary Committee, that you want him to investigate potential obstruction of justice. What tells you that that is appropriate, that has happened?
Well, let me tell you in the first place, I've served for 16 years on intelligence and 24 on judiciary. The intelligence staff is just that. It's intelligence staff. Most are not lawyers, and they are restricted to the world of intelligence. The judiciary staff are all lawyers, most very good lawyers. And so there is an opportunity to look at the law with respect to obstruction of justice, to hold a hearing, and also to have those relevant people come before the Judiciary Committee. I've been very concerned by the fact that both Director Coates and Director Rogers refused to answer the questions when put to them by members of the Intelligence Committee.
They were asked essentially if they had been pressured by President Trump, and they said they would talk about that in a closed hearing. Have they spoken in a closed hearing to senators?
Well, no, they were not in a closed hearing. The closed hearing that afternoon was just with the former director of the FBI.
So, but you feel that that's obstruction of justice, even though they've indicated a willingness to talk about it in a classified briefing?
I don't know whether it's obstruction of justice, and I don't intend to draw any conclusions until investigations are finished. I think this is very important, and I think the Intelligence Committee is doing good work and should continue. I think Senator Burr and Senator Warner did a good job in the chairs at the hearing. But I also know that there's another part of this, and that part should not be given short shrift, and it has to do with the Department of Justice.
What we heard from Director Comey, former director.
So you heard from Senator Dianne Feinstein, my senator from California, some similar sentiments as you heard from NO8549 earlier, that it's too early to decide if there is obstruction of justice, but we need investigation, and some argument as to why it should be in Judiciary rather than in the Intelligence Committee. And then Senator Dianne Feinstein also argued that the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, needed to be in Judiciary, not Intelligence, because that's the committee that has oversight over him specifically. And I don't know, is this a turf war? You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. This is the second and final clip from Senator Dianne Feinstein tonight, talking about whether the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, should testify to Intelligence or Judiciary. Does it really matter? Here's what my senator thinks over here.
So you heard that from the Attorney General. He's going to testify on Tuesday before the Intelligence Committee. Is that going to happen, and is that going to be public?
Don't know whether it will happen, don't know whether it's going to be public, and I challenge the jurisdiction to some extent. I'm on both committees, as you know.
Judiciary and Intelligence.
And, yes, and I believe that the Judiciary Committee has the oversight responsibility for the Justice Department, and therefore it is very fitting for the Attorney General to appear there. I've written 2 letters to Senator Grassley suggesting that. I pointed out that his predecessor, Mr. Holder, had a hearing of oversight in June of the first year of his term. Sessions has not, and Sessions ought to come back before the Judiciary Committee.
You said in that letter to Senator Grassley.
So there you have the senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, saying that it should be Judiciary, not Intelligence Committee, with Jeff Sessions. And that's actually the big event that is coming up this week, Tuesday. Apparently, Jeff Sessions is going to testify to the Senate Intelligence Committee. It may be public. Hopefully it's going to be public. There are a lot of questions to ask the Attorney General about why he recused himself, when he recused himself, what caused him to recuse himself. And actually, the final clip I want to show tonight is the Senate Minority Leader, the highest ranking Democrat in the Senate, talking about what he wants to hear from the Attorney General of the United States, Jeff Sessions. And I think he covers just about everything except for one missing question that I will point out he should have asked and did not ask when he was talking to John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation this morning over here.
Jeff Sessions is going to testify next week. What do you want to hear from Jeff Sessions?
Well, first, I think he should be sworn under oath. Second, I think it should be public. There's very little that's classified. Anything that's classified, they can do in a separate classified briefing. There are some questions about Sessions that have to be asked. First, did he interfere with the Russian investigation before he recused himself? Second, what safeguards are there now so that he doesn't interfere? Third, it says he was involved in the firing of Comey, and the president said Comey was fired because of Russia. How does that fit in with his recusal? It doesn't seem to stand up well to me. And fourth, he's been involved in the selection of the new FBI director. Did he talk about the Russian investigation with them? All those are important questions. I hope they'll be asked in public when Sessions under oath.
Let me ask about the previous Attorney General.
So those are all good questions to ask the Attorney General. I appreciate Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, bringing them all up, but I'm a little surprised that he didn't bring up, and John Dickerson and Face the Nation never brought up, the issue of whether the Attorney General had an undisclosed third meeting with the Russian ambassador Kislyak in April 2016. That's kind of that's been reported by anonymous sources in the mainstream media, and it was kind of not said by James Comey in his testimony, but he kind of ambiguously referred to it, that there was some other reason that Jeff Sessions was going to have to recuse himself, and I don't know what is the other shoe that's going to drop there, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. That's the final clip for the evening. For the Sandy fans out there, I promised you a picture of Sandy after she showed up, and I don't know, she seems kind of tired of the whole Russia investigation. Here's your picture of that. I don't know, does Sandy look tired? Well, I appreciate all of you who showed up for... I appreciate the super chat contribution I got from Timsky, $5 Canadian. Thank you for that. That helps when YouTube doesn't monetize my videos with advertising. I also appreciate that those of you who give me a thumbs up, who give me just supportive comments to, give me inspiration to keep going with this enterprise that is not all that financially successful, but I enjoy doing it. I hope you enjoy the clips I picked out for you, my criticism, my commentary that makes this into fair use media criticism and political commentary, and not copyright infringement, as CBS sometimes seems to think it is, and various other big corporate copyright holders. But I will be back next week with another edition of Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. And until then, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.